Good evening. Welcome to Around the World with me and friends. Tonight, I'm happy to have my good friend, Madeline Hoffman, with me.
Hi Dee, it's been too long, but
Yes, and today we are going to talking about Israel's Trojan horse and about Latin America.
yeah, and the Trojan Horse article is by Chris Hedges, and we all know how insightful a man he is, an insightful a writer, and I guess we can maybe some of you can guess what the Trojan Horse is,
Oh,
um,
yeah.
as I think we've all been talking about it, or many of us have been talking about it in one way or another. And then the Latin American piece is going to be sort of an introduction to a series that I want to do on Latin America because that's where I live now, and that's where I've done some traveling around Latin America and Central America, and which I guess is also Latin America. Um, so I'm looking forward to it, and I'm glad to be back on the show with you, Dee. There's just a lot of things going on these last couple of weeks. Um,
Definitely.
and are you back on you're back on your channel, right?
Actually, tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Yeah,
So this is StreamYard, but we're not streaming on YouTube.
we are. We're on Greg's channel.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
So
we're
that's
happy Greg's letting us use his channel till
yeah.
everything gets settled.
Yeah, and that's the one thing about, I mean, all the Facebooks and um, all the warnings, and you've been restricted for this and that, but they never tell you why.
Mm-hmm.
So, so you wind up, without any real knowledge of what you need to do differently. And I think not that not that I'm condoning any censorship at all, but at least if whomever was restricting us would say why, it could help, couldn't it?
It could.
And
Because we've been
especially,
talking about the issue where Israel's concerned and with Gaza. We've been talking about it for what, a year and a half.
yeah, and this has happened only once before, right?
Well, there was something else. It wasn't with the shows. It was like one of the short clips they had put out and stuff like
Oh,
that.
okay, so this was the first time, and I've been looking online, but I haven't been able to find it. I wrote there was supposed to be a vote today in the New Jersey Senate about the IHRA Holocaust Remembrance Act,
Hmm.
um, and I don't know whether it passed or it didn't. But if it did pass, and I think it still needs to be passed by the other house. I think it still needs to be passed by the assembly. But it's yet another restriction on what people can say about what's going on in Israel. And I've just, the last week or so, no matter what I've looked at, it seems there's an issue of censorship. And it's the censorship of, oh, that's anti Semitic. Oh, you can't say that. That's anti Semitic. And it's the censorship is coming from, or the reaction is coming from, the pro Zionist contingent of folks who don't want to hear anything at all critical about them. So I don't know. Over the weekend, I wrote a very extensive piece on censorship, supposed to be a press statement, but I've forgotten all my rules of press statement because there was so much. There was so much. There's the TikTok issue, which I know you and Greg spoke about the other night, and then there's the IHRA bill, and then in New Jersey they want to. There's a group of people who want to um, gut the Open Public Records Act for New Jersey, which means that people are going to have a much more difficult time obtaining public documents, whether no matter what they relate to in state or local government. And then there's the the representatives, and there's a representative, Josh Gottheimer, who came down hard on Teaneck High School
Hmm.
for allowing their students to have a pro-Palestinian rally about a month ago now. Um, and then another representative, Mikey Sherrill, in another district, who's trying to restrict these kinds of protests altogether. So, I mean, we really we've always faced a certain amount of censorship, right, on
Yeah.
certain issues, but it feels to me like in these last 2 weeks, two things have been happening with the coverage of what's going on in Gaza. One is more and more video of people, men, women, and children, people of Palestine crying, like losing it altogether. And it's not surprising at all,
Hmm.
because this bombardment has been, now this is month 6. It's like almost half a year now. And I think at the beginning, people kept hoping that there would be an end in sight and things wouldn't get so bad.
I
Uh,
know. I just can't believe that it's at the level it's at.
yes, and it's made worse. It's made worse by the tanks and the snipers. Every time there's a shipment of humanitarian aid or food for people, and they have to risk their lives to get food for their families. And I mean, that's where this article, Chris Hedges' article, comes in. So we might want to give it, I might want to start reading it because it's
Yeah.
already posted in the room. Um, but just when you think that Israel can't get any more vicious or cruel than it's been, they get more vicious and cruel. And they went back to Al Shifa Hospital too.
Yeah,
Um,
horrific. It was just horrible.
and I really, I mean, the Palestinians have been stoic throughout all of this. We've seen them trying to get people out from under the rubble, and we've seen them carrying people on stretchers, running with people on stretchers to get to a hospital. We've seen them do creative things so that they can cook without electricity. Um, and I think that it's really,
I don't know if anybody
it's
else
at a bridge.
would be able to
Hmm.
go through this.
No, I mean, last week I had a power outage, right? For how long? 8 o'clock at night till 3:30 the next afternoon. So that's 12 hours. Um, no, that's not even 12. It's yeah, eight at night to 8 in the morning. That's 12 hours, and then 7.5 hours. Okay, so not even a full day without power, without electricity, and I was going crazy. It's like, well, how am I going to cook? I can't cook because I have electric heat. How am I going to charge my phones? I mean, these are things, and I'm not living in a wealthy area.
Hmm.
But even so, we've become so reliant on all those things. I know, Dee, that I couldn't make it through. I don't think I could make it through one day without losing my composure.
And that's what I started thinking to myself that, and you hate to say it, but this generation of Zionists,
Mm,
they should there should be some kind of karma that they have to experience what they've been pushing on the Palestinians. There should be karma for this.
well, even if it were, 8 hours of living under these conditions, because I don't know about Zionists necessarily, but I do know about the IDF and their cavalier attitude towards what
Hmm.
they're doing to the Palestinians. I wonder if it would change at all if they were forced to live through some of what the Palestinians are going through. Um, but then you think about the pregnant women, then you think about women on their monthly cycles, then you think about the sanitation, or the lack thereof, and then you think about the food and the exorbitant food prices, and you think about living, sleeping in a tent outside in the cold and the rain, and the children. One child I've seen on a video a couple times now, she prefers to stand out in the rain because it's warmer outside than it is in the tent. Um, you know,
The horrific conditions that they're intentionally putting Palestinians through.
yes,
There's got
yes.
there's got to be some recourse for this. It's
Yeah, at some point there's got to be, and you see the smug Netanyahu saying that he's going to proceed with an invasion of Rafah, and there are going to be humanitarian zones in the middle of the Gaza Strip. Yeah, like the safe zones. I mean, then I was even watching a video, and I'll start reading this in a minute.
mhm.
um, there was even a video of Bisan, the journalist. She was on Mawasi, and she was interviewing some people there about conditions. And there was a bomb that was dropped in the sea, but close to the shore, not that far away from her. And there have been other bombs in the tent cities. There's just absolutely nothing that's safe or sacred, in a place you don't want to bomb. Hospitals, churches, mosques. It's just out. It's been out of control. But um,
It's a vicious psychology that you would say the Zionists indoctrinate the people into, the youth, and they have no respect for human life whatsoever.
no, they don't. And I mean, I saw. Oh, and I saw a video today on that note of a on the West Bank, which is, again, we keep saying we can't forget about the West Bank. Um, that, but there was the caption on the video was that Jewish settlers accost or assault Palestinian kids on the West Bank. And they were exchanging words. Mostly, it seemed the Jewish settlers were talking about it, were egging on the Palestinian boys. And then, all of a sudden, one of the settlers walks up to one of the Palestinians and spits right in his face.
That's
I mean,
disgusting.
literally spits right in his face. And it's like, well, who taught you? Who taught you? Well, and you just said, Dee, we know who's taught them and what they've been taught. And it's just,
I-
you know,
It's a sick psychology they're indoctrinated into.
Yeah, and I don't know that I don't imagine that there's much that can change that unless, as you said, and I know you also said you hate to say it, but it's unless there's some kind of karma where the settlers get to see firsthand or live firsthand what they're doing to the Palestinians. And I mean, for my part, that that 3 days or 2.5 days that I spent on the West Bank back in 2013, now more than 10 years ago, just a little more than 10, that changed me forever because I didn't exactly experience it, except I saw, I heard one. Oh man, there's a dog behind me too. Do you hear it?
Yes.
I hear your dogs, my dogs.
Yeah.
My dog, not my dog, my neighbor's dog.
Your neighbor's dog. Yeah.
Yeah. Um. Now I lost my train of thought. So. Um. Oh yes, West Bank. Um. It was what it took for me to stop being ambivalent about things, to stop saying, "Oh yeah, I'm going to give the Israelis the benefit of the doubt."
No, they're singing the song of
What's
their
going on with your dogs?
They're singing the song of their ancestors. They've got to.
Yeah. Um, no, I don't give the Israeli Zionists the benefit of the doubt anymore because
No, I
yeah, and
I'm the
that's
same
what
way.
has to happen. People have to live that experience or share that experience, to have empathy for it. But but in all honesty, they shouldn't have to. They should, if they're human, they shouldn't have to.
Exactly. It should be normal not to behave that way and to
Right,
do the things
right,
they do to people.
right. Or block the aid or shoot people trying to get food. Anyway, back to the food issue. This is from the Chris Hedges report. It's from
Yeah.
um, today's one his report from today, Substack from today, and the headline is Israel's Trojan Horse, and he tells you right away what the Trojan Horse is. He says the quote temporary pier unquote being built on the Mediterranean coast of Gaza is not there to alleviate the famine, but to herd Palestinians onto ships and into permanent exile. That's quite a claim, but he's going to back it up.
Yes.
Uh,
And, here's the picture.
yeah, that's Israel's Trojan Horse by Mr. Fish.
Mm-hmm.
Does some incredible artwork. Piers allow things to come in, they allow things to go out. And Israel, which has no intention of halting its murderous siege of Gaza, including its policy of enforced starvation, appears to have found a solution to its problem of where to expel the 2.3 million Palestinians. If the Arab world will not take them, as Secretary of State Antony Blinken proposed during his first round of visits after October 7th, the Palestinians will be cast adrift on ships. It worked in Beirut in 1982 when some 8,500 Palestinian Liberation Organization members were sent by sea to Tunisia, and another 2,500 ended up in other Arab states. Israel expects that the same forced deportation by sea will work in Gaza. Israel, for this reason, supports the quote unquote temporary pier the Biden administration is building to ostensibly deliver food and aid to Gaza. Food and aid whose quote distribution unquote will be overseen by the, wait for it, Israeli military. Ha! Quote, you need drivers that don't exist, trucks that don't exist, feeding into a distribution system that does not exist. Jeremy Konendijk, a former senior aid official in the Biden administration, and now president of the Refugees International Aid Advocacy Group, told The Guardian. This, quote, maritime corridor, unquote, is Israel's Trojan horse, a subterfuge to expel Palestinians. The small shipments of seaborne aid, like the food packets that have been airdropped, will not alleviate the looming famine. They are not meant to. 5 Palestinians were killed and several others injured when a parachute carrying aid failed and crashed onto a crowd of people near Gaza City's Shati refugee camp. Quote, dropping aid in this way is flashy propaganda rather than a humanitarian service, the media office of the local government in Gaza said. Quote continues, we previously warned it poses a threat to the lives of citizens in the Gaza Strip, and this is what happened today when the parcels fell on the citizens' heads, end quote.
Oh.
And Dee, I've seen also multiple videos of Palestinian men who had set out to get a food parcel and then had to come back because they couldn't get anywhere near the distribution site, or they couldn't get anywhere near the packets that were dropped. And they all say it's humiliating. This is a humiliating way to deliver aid. Oh, you're hungry? Here, come and get it. And then you have to scramble over the sand dunes and scramble over the sand and push your way through with other Palestinians. And everything I've seen, I had seen up to this point, the Palestinians are gracious. They help one another. They live in a community. They're not out. If one person goes to get food and they come back, it's to feed the whole family, or it's to feed everybody who's still in the house.
Yes.
It's not about, make me fight my friends and my community members for the food. It's not about that. But when people are desperate,
it's just so humiliating, though.
it's humiliating. And then somebody opened up the food packet, one of the food packets, and from what I could see, there was virtually no food in it. There was some sauce and there was something else, but mostly empty calories, no food. And that's also humiliating.
And that should be done over in Israel, because they're all cheering this on.
Mm-hmm.
So they should have to experience it.
Yeah, that would be something, wouldn't it? But instead, they get to go out and do what they want, and they go to the beach, and they, it might be too cold right now to go to the beach, but life goes on as normally, except those who are protesting in Tel Aviv, but they're not protesting to end the violence against Palestinians.
No,
they're protesting to get Netanyahu out. It's gone back to that now. Anyway, the other thing that was said yesterday was that Israel said, Netanyahu said, we're not letting the aid in now because we respect Ramadan and we know that people are fasting.
Oh, what a pig.
Yeah.
He's disgusting.
Nothing to do with Ramadan, Benjamin Netanyahu. And you better clean up. Well, at some point, hopefully he'll get a comeuppance just to be tried as a war criminal and found guilty and put in jail, that would do it for me.
Yes.
Um, for these people to be held accountable for their horrible actions and their vicious natures.
Yes, the universe has got to
Yes,
take care of the situation.
we sure hope so.
Yes.
Um, and I'm not looking for violence, and I'm not looking for death. I'm just looking for what is deserved, which is, be stripped of your governmental power and find yourself in a prison for the rest of your life. Anyway, that maybe that makes me feel a little better. Maybe it makes you feel a little better to envision Netanyahu in a prison cell.
Yeah, and a
That's,
horrible prison cell.
yes,
Not a
with
luxury one.
no. Anyway, continuing on for talking about this Trojan horse. If the U.S. or Israel were serious about alleviating the humanitarian crisis, the thousands, and that's in italics, Chris Hedges italicizes that, the thousands of trucks with food and aid currently at the southern border of Gaza would be allowed to enter any of its multiple crossings. They are not. The quote temporary pier unquote, like the airdrops, is ghoulish theater, a way to mask Washington's complicity in the genocide. Israeli media reported the building of the pier was due to pressure by the United Arab Emirates, which threatened Israel with ending a land corridor trade route it administers in collusion with Saudi Arabia and Jordan to bypass Yemen's naval blockade. And Jordan, I heard today, they shot down drones shot by Iraq, I believe, toward Israel. They shot them down.
Mm.
Jordan did. Jordan is not on the Palestinian side,
Yeah,
suffice it to say.
yeah, it's looking out for its own. You know what? They get water from Israel.
Oh,
Yeah, so they want their water, and also they know that Jordan is part of the Greater Israel plan.
yes,
So
yes.
uh, maybe they're trying to not want it to happen, or hopefully
Yeah,
it doesn't happen.
yeah, to stay on the good side.
Yeah.
The Israelis, which, as we have now seen and we've seen before as well, if there's any question about which side you're on, if you want to protect your life and the lives of the people who live in your country, you have to try to stay on Israel's good side. But that means then that the Palestinians are basically left to fend for themselves. And there's also been a number of videos of people like one mother who went out to get food for her family, came back with the food, and her children were buried under the rubble.
Yes. That's so many times you see, the type of story, the family under the rubble after, the mother or the father went out for food and they came back and
And their children are gone.
yes.
Yeah. Um, Yes, so, and then she went out in the middle of the street, this mother did, and where are the other Arab countries? Where are you? Where are you? We need you.
Exactly. Where are you?
Well, they're here, colluding with Saudi Arabia um, to bypass Yemen's naval blockade.
Yeah.
That's where they are.
And they
Uh,
shouldn't be. Saudi Arabia doesn't have to.
no, no,
Jordan, originally Jordan wasn't really getting involved in it too much. I mean, they
no.
were, and then they did make a statement at one point, and then the issue with their water,
Yeah, that's a
the
big
water
deal.
contract. So
But then again, you got to think about this, and I can't do the research now. We're on the air, but you got to wonder, how did it wind up that Israel has water? I mean, I know within Israel how it wound up that Israel had water and the Palestinians didn't. But I'm wondering how it wound up that Israel has water enough to sell to Jordan.
yeah,
Is that part of the Greater Israel Plan? Is to get people to be dependent on Israel for certain natural resources? Did they grab those resources? Well, we know how much they've grabbed
there was some
illegally.
kind of agreement with Jordan and Israel, and Jordan just in the neighboring countries. But Jordan it does have a problem with Israel and the settlers,
Hmm.
the West Bank, Alaska Mosque. They have issue. They've taken issue with that, but they can just go so far because they're not that big of a place.
Yeah, and I read somewhere somebody writing about how Netanyahu is pretty savvy, and he set these things up to benefit the Israelis. But I do think it's falling apart in front of. It's falling apart
It
because
is.
he's, as empires go and what empires do, they develop this excessive pride. And I mean, he's not going. He doesn't sound like he's going to allow anybody to stop him
No,
from
he's
going
not.
into Rafah. Um, and I think he and Daniela Weiss deserve each other.
They do
Um,
definitely.
they're peas in a pod. They're so much the same. At least in public talk, they have the same ideas. And anyway, let me continue on. Um, but I'll say too, others have seen right through this temporary peer business, because there have already we what we reported on a long time ago now, the settlements that are being sold with a ocean view property.
Yeah,
um,
it's sick.
anyway, yeah, it is sick. And all of the screaming and the shouting and the anti-Semitic, um, and the Hamas is designed to try to keep people from understanding what's really going on. But oh yeah, and the sale of TikTok too. We
Hmm.
cannot forget that. We've got to keep people ignorant. Well, I got news for you. People are not ignorant anymore, and they're looking at every move that's made. And
Exactly.
hopefully, it will be enough to bring an end to this madness, and soon. Um, Okay, the Jerusalem Post reported it was Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu who proposed the construction of the quote unquote temporary pier to the Biden administration. So it can't be for a good
No,
cause, can it?
no,
No,
cannot be.
no, not with Netanyahu at the helm.
No,
Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, or another buddy of ours,
I know, right?
quote, who has called Palestinians, quote, human animals, unquote, and advocated a total siege of Gaza, including cutting off electricity, food, water, and fuel, lauded the plan, saying, quote, it is designed to bring aid directly to the residents and thus continue the collapse of Hamas's rule in Gaza, unquote. Yeah, right.
He's so full of shit.
Yeah. Tell us how you really feel,
Really feel? I know.
you know? Um, why would Israel, the engineer of the Gaza famine, endorsed the idea of establishing a maritime corridor for aid to address a crisis it initiated and is now worsening, writes Tamara Nasser in an article titled, quote, "What's the Real Purpose of Biden's Gaza Port?"
Uh-huh.
unquote, in the Electronic Intifada. Quote, "This might appear paradoxical if one were to assume that the primary aim of the maritime corridor is to deliver aid," unquote. When Israel offers a gift to the Palestinians, you can be sure it is a poison apple.
That's true.
Thank you, Chris Hedges. That Israel got the Biden administration to construct the pier is one more example of the inverted relationship between Washington and Jerusalem, where the Israel lobby has bought off elected officials in the two ruling parties. Oxfam, in a March 15th report, accuses Israel, March 15th, that was only a couple days ago, accuses Israel of actively hindering aid operations in Gaza in defiance of the orders by the International Court of Justice. The International Court of Justice. It notes that 1.7 million Palestinians, some 75% of the Gaza population, in other words, 3 out of every 4 people, 3 out of every 4 are facing famine, and 2/3 of the hospitals and over 80% of all health clinics in Gaza are no longer operable. The majority of people, the report reads, quote, "have no access to clean drinking water," unquote, and, quote, "sanitation services are not functioning," end quote.
Terrible.
Yes. No, it is a nightmare. It's a humanitarian catastrophe. Oh yeah, and who was being sent to somewhere to spread the lie or misinformation that people in Gaza are not starving?
Good old APAC.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, these people. I posted something from President Xi of China about the crisis that's being created in the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And I had somebody say, "Oh, why are you quoting G? Because he has no moral authority whatsoever."
What?
Yeah, they're talking about the debunked claim about the
Uyghurs?
genocide of um, Uyghurs, and then there's also still the thought that he's a vicious dictator in China. And when this person posted this question, how can you quote him because he's got no moral authority? My response was, "Oh yeah, but Biden and Netanyahu do."
Right. Because when there is a problem over there in China, you notice how they quickly try to resolve it. They look to see what's going on in a particular town, how they can improve things, what's the best way to handle things. It's completely different.
Oh man, and don't get me started on the United States either. Um, I was talking to someone here in Colombia about the United States and Cordoba, Colombia, where I'm living, and one of her children is living in Chicago, um, and he calls it the United States of slavery. Um, he's there only because there's money to be made, more money to be made in the U.S. than in Colombia right now. But he said the life there he says it's really tough. It's really difficult. There's no sense of community, and everybody is looking to get a dollar, and that's there's no basis for building a community. And I mean, what's going on in the United States now, and the money's being shipped to either Israel or to Ukraine. It's not being used for the public good in the United States.
They don't want to use it for the public good. That's their intent.
No, I agree with you on that. That it's so disheartening, and
Neither party.
no, neither party is, and still people are saying that Biden is a much better man than Trump.
Oh, he's pure evil.
I'd love to see a chart about that. I'd love to, and not of promises that are made, okay? Because it's you can make it promises from now until 10, 20 years from now, but do you live up to your promises?
Right.
Because the parties know what will make them electable, but that doesn't mean they're going to implement those things.
Right.
Anyway, to continue. Aren't you glad that I'm back, T? I keep taking us off topic. Well, I sort of off topic, not really. The report reads, this is from Oxfam again. The conditions we have observed in Gaza are beyond catastrophic. Beyond catastrophic. Let those words sink in. And we have not only seen failure by Israeli authorities to meet their responsibility to facilitate and support international aid efforts, but in fact seen active steps being taken to hinder and undermine such aid efforts. Israel's control of Gaza continues to be characterized by deliberate, restrictive actions that have led to a severe and systemic dysfunctionality in the delivery of aid. So it sure looks like that to be that. Oxfam is a neutral organization. It's an anti-hunger organization. That's all they care. That's all, not all, but that's their main focus. And they're not trying to pick sides. They're just trying to tell it like it is. Humanitarian organizations operational in Gaza are reporting a worsening situation since the International Court of Justice imposed provisional measures in light of the plausible risk of genocide, with intensified Israeli barriers, restrictions, and attacks against humanitarian personnel. Israel has maintained a quote, convenient illusion of a response, unquote, in Gaza to serve its claim that it's allowing aid in and conducting the war in line with international laws.
Oh, yeah.
They wouldn't know an international law if it came and spanked them on the backside.
Exactly. I mean, this is horrific. It really is. I mean, they're such liars.
Yeah, and the rest of us have a huge responsibility then to tell the truth and to keep on telling the truth and to not let ourselves get caught up in, any one of a number of distractions. Oh yeah, and let's not forget UNRWA, the defunding of UNRWA, the day or two after the ICJ ruling, where Israel was admonished to start allowing more humanitarian aid in and to stop killing. Boy. Oxfam says Israel employs, quote, a dysfunctional and undersized inspection system that keeps aid snarled up, subjected to onerous repetitive, and unpredictable bureaucratic procedures that are contributing to trucks being stranded in giant queues for 20 days on average, unquote. Israel, Oxfam explains, rejects, quote, items of aid as having dual military use, banning vital fuel and generators entirely, along with other items essential for a meaningful humanitarian response, such as protective gear and communications kit, unquote. Rejected aid, quote, must go through a complex, quote, pre-approval, unquote, system, or end up being held in limbo at the Al Arish warehouse in Egypt, unquote. And then I've also heard that if one item in the truck is not approved, the entire truck cannot go in.
Right. And that is just terrible. Yeah, they
Yeah.
have to get that calmer. And that's the one thing with Yemen,
Mm-hmm.
with the Houthis, were, you know, they have the right idea. And it's just terrible with what they're experiencing, but not allowing the trade to proceed, to Israel, if you're going to continue what you're doing in Gaza. And that's the correct way to be. I wish others would do the same thing.
Yeah, that you need to be denied the food and the goods that you need. But also I was not feeling well today, so I was scrolling a lot. Um, Israel has been getting away, and we know this. They've been getting away with this for 75 years, and without ever being held to account for it. And so, if you've done something wrong for 75 years, but everybody kind of looks the other way, then you keep doing it. They're held to a totally different standard than the rest of the world would be. And then, of course, when you start to criticize it, they come at you with the anti Semitic charge, and people just sort of put their tails between their legs and walk off. But I don't think that's not happening much anymore.
No. And when we talk about, which we've talked about it several times, actually a lot of times on the show, when it comes to Semitic languages, that's what Semite means, that the language. And
Yeah.
Arabic is the largest Semitic language. Palestinians speak a Semitic language. And I was reading also, looking at the history, how when you talk about the true Hebrews, who are the true Hebrews? And it's the Palestinians. The
Mm.
Palestinians have been in that region, and throughout history, yeah, sure, they people um, changed belief systems, and that was because somebody else was controlling the area, and in order to not pay higher taxes or whatever the reason was, they would go to the different belief system.
Mm.
And but they stayed in the region, and people that left the region usually were wealthier people that had the ability to do so if they wanted
Yes.
to. But
Yes.
but the poor people, and mainly the farmers and stuff like that, people that they really love the land and all, I mean, they stayed there. They stayed there through everything that occurred throughout history. And their DNA goes back to the original people in the region. Them and in Lebanon, they noticed from artifacts and DNA. So they
Mm.
don't have this foreign DNA in them. They don't have Eastern European DNA in them.
Well, and if you belong to the land and you make your living from the land and your culture is centered around the land, um, I mean, then you would never. And I was writing about this yesterday as well. You would never just bulldoze olive trees.
No, you wouldn't.
I mean, you would understand the how vital the olive trees are to the region. You'd understand the beauty of the olive tree. You'd understand the strength of the olive tree. You'd understand how important it is to that region. And you wouldn't come in with the bulldozers. I think that the Israelis just love bulldozers because they can flatten the olive trees, they can flatten the houses, and I think John Deere needs to be. Was there? No, it was Vol. Who was the
Caterpillar.
Caterpillar? Yeah, I mean they need to be held to account too because their bulldozers are being used to destroy. Um, and there's a lot of I remember Murad when he was on. Remember that was like ages ago that he was on. Now it seems.
It seems, yes,
Um,
everything that's been going on.
yeah, he studied agriculture in university, and he, but as a Palestinian, he had a really hard time finding work. Um, and it took him several years to find a job that utilized his knowledge of agriculture. Um, but his knowledge of the land, and I compare it a little bit to the campesinos that I know here in Colombia and their connection to the land, their knowledge of the land, or even going back to the Mayans. I've been reading about them, and how they have a sun calendar and a lunar calendar.
Yeah.
And, when you grow things, you time the cycle. The growth cycle is timed to the lunar and solar cycle. Um, and this is a way, I mean, when you lose that connection, when the Western world loses that connection, when anybody loses that connection, it can spell disaster
It
for
spells
the
disaster.
area. Hmm?
It spells disaster. And we look at here, say in North America with the Industrial Revolution and getting people off the land, pushing people off the land,
Yes.
and having them work in the cities. So they lost so much knowledge, and then the sense of community as well.
Then they what?
The sense of community from the small
Oh yes.
towns.
Oh yes. And even here in Colombia, it's at risk. It's being threatened, but the idea of community still exists. And Gustavo Petro has put a new push behind forming zones that are reserved for campesinos, so that land is protected. Land is protected against gold mining, coal mining, all kinds of extraction industry. And I've been to two meetings in the last week on this issue, and might be going to a meeting on Friday about the whole situation of water in the department here, because these are things that, I mean, if as we know, water is life, and as the Gazans know, no water is no life. Um, and these are things that more and more people should be thinking about and caring about. Let me go on because I don't have a hard stop tonight, but I don't want to. My voice sounds like it's starting to complain a little. So
Okay.
because I'm enjoying
Yes.
talking with you, Dee. It's been a
Yes.
while.
It has been a while.
It's been a
Yes.
while. All right. So the rejected aid must go through a complex pre-approval system, or end up being held in limbo. We said that. Okay. Um, Israel has also, quote, cracked down on humanitarian missions. Ah, if there's a humanitarian crisis, Don't you want an increase in humanitarian missions?
Yeah.
Right?
So you can tell that they have no relationship with any higher power that they claim to be part of, a system they're a part of.
No. And it continues on. Crackdown on humanitarian missions, largely sealing off northern Gaza and restricting international humanitarian workers' access not only into Gaza, but Israel and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem too. End quote. Israel has allowed 15,413 trucks into Gaza during the past 157 days of war. Oxfam estimates that the people of Gaza need 5 times that number. 5 times. Israel allowed 2,874 trucks in February, a 44% reduction from the previous month. And the previous month was when the ruling from the ICJ was supposed to kick in. No, that's January. Yeah, right, January. And then in February, that was when it was supposed to kick in. Look at how well they followed the measures put forward by the ICJ. Not. Before October 7th, 500 aid trucks entered Gaza every day. So that 15,000 during the 157 days of war ideally would be in 1 month, because it would be 30 days times 500. And there's nothing, nowhere near that coming in to Gaza on a daily basis.
No.
Nowhere near that. Israeli soldiers have also killed scores of Palestinians attempting to receive aid from trucks in at least a half dozen separate incidents. These attacks include the killing of at least 21 Palestinians and the wounding of 150 on March 14th, when Israeli forces fired on thousands of people in Gaza City. The same area had been targeted by Israeli soldiers hours earlier. Quote, Israel's assault has caught Gaza's own aid workers and international agencies partners inside a, quote, practically uninhabitable, unquote, environment of mass displacement and deprivation, where 75% of solid waste is now being dumped in random sites, 97% of groundwater made unfit for human use, and the Israeli state using starvation as a weapon of war, Sam says.
Pure evil. This pure evil is all around them.
Yes, I mean, using starvation as a weapon of war. Women, children, babies, men, older men, younger men who aren't at all involved in, I mean, they want to keep their homeland and they want to see people return, but there's no crime in that.
Yeah.
Um,
This is just pure evil. I mean, it's just unimaginable evil. How can
yes.
how do they refer to themselves as humans?
Good question. And then the rave parties and the jumping up and down and celebrating when they keep the trucks out of Gaza. I mean,
Yeah.
those are settlers sitting up there or standing up there, or there was one picture of a man reading from the Torah. Come on, you're gonna show that you're pious while you're standing in front of trucks with humanitarian aid?
I'm sure the higher power would say I don't know you.
Yeah, I mean it just doesn't jive with what a holy person or a sacred or a religious person or even just a secular person who believes in the golden rule.
Right.
I mean, almost I think it's every religion and polytheistic and monotheistic. They almost all of them have a form of the golden rule.
Yes, and this is just everything, like we say over and over again. It's just everything that's evil of an evil entity that you should stay away from.
Yeah. Well, we'll see what the whole League of not the League of Nations, but the group of nations will do as this continues to unfold. Um, I think shunning is not a bad idea,
Mhm.
but first the violence that they plan has to be stopped.
Yes.
Um, there is no place in Gaza, Oxfam notes, that is safe, quote, amid the forcible and often multiple displacements of almost the entire population, which makes the principal distribution of aid unviable, including agencies' ability to help repair vital public services at scale. Oxfam blasts Israel for its, quote, disproportionate, unquote, and, quote, indiscriminate, unquote, attacks on, quote, civilian and humanitarian assets, unquote, as well as, quote, solar, water, power, and sanitation plants, UN premises, hospitals, roads, and aid convoys, and warehouses, even when these assets are supposedly, quote, deconflicted, quote, after the coordinates have been shared for protection. They have absolutely no empathy, no humanity, no moral compass whatsoever.
No.
It's just, no, we don't want them to eat. Well, we heard Daniela Weiss say, when asked, how does she know that there won't be any Arabs left in Gaza? And her response was, you don't give them anything. You don't feed them. You don't give them water. They'll leave. One way or the other, they'll leave. This is also calculated.
Right, and this should basically work its way back to all the people that are just like her. Let them experience it.
Yeah, she's so smug, really.
Mhm.
You know, and I over the years, I have lost a strong sense of my own Judaism, mostly because um, of a lot of things that have occurred around the world and what's happened in Israel, Palestine, and my experiences there when I visited. And when I lived there for 6 months when I was in college. Um, but I still feel ashamed when I hear Jews saying these things because, I mean,
It's
I
just
don't,
so against
mhm,
Judaism.
yeah, it doesn't fit. It's not, and in some place that I saw today, talking about the rise in quote unquote anti-Semitism in the world. Um, this was another person or study that said, oh yeah, when you conflate everything, when you say as a Zionist, you're representing all Jews and and this is where Judaism leads and you claim to represent that, no wonder, anti-Semitic, quote unquote, anti-Semitic acts are up because you've made, the statements that blame, that claim that you represent all Jews, which is so far from the truth when you see
Exactly.
Jewish Voice for Peace and anti-Zionist Jews, and if not now, and If Americans only knew, and there's so many organizations of Jewish people who are standing side by side with Palestinians.
Right, because what's happening to the Palestinians, I mean, that's not Judaism. That's not how the teachings of the Torah. That's not has nothing to do with the teachings of Judaism. This Zionism is a completely different thing. It's a
Yeah,
political movement. It's not a religious thing. It's a political movement. Zionism.
yes. And plus, if you want to talk about empathy, there are many Holocaust survivors getting very much up there in age, but they see the parallels, and we're going to talk later if we have time about Lula in Brazil and his statements um, about the Holocaust. A lot of people see it because they're not blinded by this sense of being the chosen ones, or exceptionalism. I think some of us in the U.S. have come up against U.S. exceptionalism when it comes to wars around the planet. Um, and we um, decry that. I mean, there's no exceptional person or
No,
exceptional group of people or exceptional country on this planet. We're all in this together, and if we don't understand that, we're all going to go down together.
that's the
Um,
truth.
and that's just not. It's not in my plans, but I don't know how much time I got left. But there are a lot of people all around the world who think the way you and I and Joe and Greg, the way we all think on this show, and the people who are watching us as well, or listening in. Well, I think there are a lot more people who think that way than think the way that Netanyahu and Biden think, um, or Ben Gavir. I
Yeah,
should.
yeah, that's just complete madness and insanity.
He applauds the killing of 12-year-olds. Oh, this man should get a medal.
It's
He did
sick.
such a service. Ugh.
Yeah, it's a sickness. It's an evil that they've been indoctrinated into.
I don't know about those two, but yeah, I mean, maybe they were indoctrinated. Maybe they adopted it because they figured it would serve them well. I don't know. I'm not going to speculate about those two.
Right.
Just get them out of government. That's
You
all.
get him out, and that movement's got to stop. It's
Yes,
just evil movement.
yes, it is. All right, so let me continue here. Um, the health ministry in Gaza said Monday, that's today, that at least 31,726 people have been killed since the Israeli assault began 5 months ago. The death toll includes at least 81 deaths in the previous 24 hours, a ministry statement said, adding that 73,792 people have been wounded in Gaza since October 7th. Thousands more are missing, many buried under the rubble. Now it's kids who are yelling.
Mm.
Sorry, I can't keep it quiet here for long. None of these Israeli tactics will be altered with the building of a quote temporary pier unquote. In fact, given the pending ground assault on Rafah, where 1.2 million displaced Palestinians are crowded in tent cities or camped out in the open air, Israel's tactics will only get worse. Israel, by design, is creating a humanitarian crisis of such catastrophic proportions, with thousands of Palestinians killed by bombs, shells, missiles, bullets, starvation, and infectious diseases. And I'm going to add dehydration. You left that one out.
Mm.
That the only option will be death or deportation. The pier is where the last act in this gruesome genocidal campaign will be played out, as Palestinians are herded by Israeli soldiers onto ships. And how appropriate that the Biden administration, without whom this genocide could not be carried out, will facilitate it. Ooh,
Oh, that is just horrific, evil.
it's chilling. It's
It,
chilling.
and people think he deserves to be voted again. Vote him in again. He's disgusting.
What's that?
Biden, that he should
Yeah.
be voted back
Oh,
in.
jeez. Yes. Absolutely no. Absolutely not. And there is a beginning of a campaign that says a vote for Joe, or Joe, genocide Joe is a vote for genocide.
It
And
is.
I mean I've been saying that for a number of weeks now and getting very negative pushback from a lot of people. Oh, it's not genocide. Oh no, it's Hamas that's doing the genocide, not Israelis. Oh, how?
Hamas. I was going to say Hamas is being used as an excuse.
Yes, yes, indeed. And I used it again today. I haven't said this for a while, but could you? People need to stop. The pro-Zionist people need to stop using Hamas as a shield from their own humanity, because a lot of people are justifying or rationalizing this by 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 citing Hamas, and that's how they can avoid taking responsibility.
Right, because how many shows? We had a lot of shows last year, and the tragedy that was happening in both the West Bank and in Gaza, and with all the atrocities that were happening in Gaza by Israeli terrorism, we were frightened. We were thinking, oh my, oh no.
Hmm.
You just saw how, and they even said it, what, March of 2023, it was said about wiping out the Palestinians. So it's always been their plan to ethnically cleanse. They've said it. They've had their maps, one Israel,
Oh
but
yeah,
all the,
remember Netanyahu in front of the UN with a
yeah,
map that had no mention of Palestine, and there was virtually no world outcry against that.
right. It's the intention all along. It has nothing to do with Hamas. And their plan was for a long time that whole one Israel, and actually beyond Palestine, taking over Jordan and Lebanon,
Syria.
yeah, Iraq, parts of it, and yeah, so they have this plan to take over these other areas. So to blame Hamas for their behavior when they've been pushing this behavior, it's ridiculous.
Oh, and speaking of Iraq, I agree, it is ridiculous. But speaking of Iraq, tomorrow is a very significant day, because it is March 19th, 2024. And it was March 19th, 2003, when the U.S. invaded Iraq in the second Gulf War. Um, I
And
found,
Netanyahu's hands were in on that too.
what's that? Yes,
Netanyahu,
yeah, yeah. But you see, the U.S. didn't finish the job. Well, the U.S. didn't finish the job in 1991. So then the U.S. continued to basically unilaterally impose sanctions on Iraq. And then we had the wondrous statement of Madeleine Albright, who said, "Oh yeah, the 500,000 children who died from, the sanctions. was a price worth paying because we could unseat Saddam Hussein. And then we continued in 2003 with shock and awe for 8 years, 8 more years, and now the U.S. troops won't leave. The U.S. troops won't leave Iraq, even though Iraq has asked them to leave over and over and over again. And I assume that they're there in part because Netanyahu wants them to be. Fortification against Iran. Um, I mean, these people, he's had this idea for years and he doesn't want to let it go. He
No,
doesn't
no, he
want.
doesn't. And then when he said that they definitely had weapons of mass destruction, he sat there and lied about that. So he's a man with a history of lying.
Yeah, and then we've had a few of those liars, like George W. Bush,
Yeah,
and then we've had, unfortunately, I know a lot of people had respect for Colin Powell, but he lied as well about the weapons of mass destruction. Um, and here we are, and it's 20 more than 2 decades later, and we're coming back around to the same place we were in 2003. But a lot of people have been killed, a lot of people have been displaced. Syria is still, a target. Iran is still a target. Um,
and it's all because of Israel.
yes, some people don't like to take no for an answer, and here we go.
Yeah, Israel's the Greater Israel Plan.
Yeah,
That's gonna, they try to say that they're surrounded by enemies and all this other stuff. Well, they don't want to get along with their neighbors. They want
no,
to take over the land.
exactly, and they've been doing so for years, um, and they've intensified it since October 7th.
Oh, definitely.
Very much so. I'm running out of steam here. My voice is cracking. But I guess, should we play that video or should we save it and
Yeah, we can.
just do a brief PR on what's coming?
Yeah,
Um, what do you think?
okay, I could just put the in the room the one article, and you could say you're going to be talking about
Oh, all right. Um, so let me get back in there. Um, so yeah, I because I live in Colombia, and in South America, and I've been experiencing firsthand, um, a different way of looking at the Israeli actions against Gaza, the Israeli genocide. Um, I would like to do a series of programs about different places in Latin America and Colombia, Bolivia, Brazil, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua. They're all on my list. And I this um, let's let's look at the. I mean, I really I don't want
okay,
to talk about the video, but let's look at the video. Because
okay,
if we talk about the video, it'll be half an hour because me and my big mouth. Um, but there is a growing coalition and growing alliance. No, not that one.
okay. Wait a second. Let me get it off of here.
Growing alliance within Latin America, sparked by what happened to. Oh no, there it is. There it is. It's a little more than 5 minutes. This is an interview. Um, with someone from Brazil who speaks English, so no No subtitles or translation is necessary. And they're talking about Lula and Brazil and Latin America and the position that they've taken against um, the genocide in Gaza. So we can watch some of this anyway,
Okay, let me put it on.
and then see where we go. I can at least rest my voice during it.
I have the right to boycott anyone I want
This
to,
is an
and the
interesting
state has no
ad too.
business getting involved in that.
God's chosen to bless us because we protect Israel.
Oh.
I'm going to continue to do on a state level all that I can to support that.
A new three-part series explores the implications of U.S. anti-boycott laws for freedom of speech and First Amendment rights.
I regret not knowing more about the issue when I voted.
I'm looking forward for my day in court.
Part 2, In Court, on Al Jazeera.
It looks
James
interesting.
Belo Lopez is a professor of international and comparative politics at the Federal University of Minas Gerais and joins us from Belo Horizonte in Brazil. Good to have you with us on the program. It does seem that when Lula da Silva speaks, South America and the global audience sit up and take note. How important is it for Brazil's leader to say what he says in the way that he says it?
That's a good question, because Brazil under Lula has become a prominent player on the international scenario again. And if you take the numbers, it explains quite a lot. Brazil accounts for half of the territory, the economy, and the population of South America. So when Brazil speaks, it speaks. I mean, it projects voice of South America to the rest of the world.
In terms of the recall of the Brazilian ambassador back to Brasilia, it's not the first South American country to do this. Early on in this conflict in Gaza, Chile, Colombia, Honduras, and Bolivia cut diplomatic ties very quickly. Why do you think President da Silva waited?
It took a while for him to find the right tone, the right approach. So you're right when you remember that many other countries in South America, and mostly left-wing governments, they have decided to cut ties with Israel much before Brazil. But over the last 3 or 4 weeks, I'd say Brazil has been escalating. So the tone has been elevated. And of course, the circumstances, both domestic and international, have been important to explain, to account for this change.
Do we expect that tone to become stronger or more vocal as Brazil takes the presidency of both the G20 and then the financial group BRICS?
I don't think it's going to become stronger or even stronger, because it's already reached an added height. And so I believe the next steps would involve some efforts in order to reconcile and to calm down the atmosphere, the diplomatic atmosphere, because at the moment, relations are really tense between the two countries. So it cannot go any tenser or any more intoxicated. So the tendency is exactly the opposite. I believe the countries will find ways to collaborate. I don't know how, but they might.
And of course, one of the big issues that President Silva has to be concerned about is his domestic audience. There is a sizable Jewish community in Brazil, over 10 million Arabs. He walks a very fine line, doesn't he, when it comes to making sure that he can keep his public on side at least?
Actually, it does. Yes, we in Brazil have around 150,000 Jewish people in the country. And they exert lots of power in some specific issue areas. And they, of course, they might have an upper hand in determining the kind of foreign policy. In the past, at least, they would have a lot of, room to maneuver, and they would be very influential in defining the guidelines, the lines of Brazil's foreign policy. But nowadays, I think things might have changed a little bit, because Lula, he doesn't seem to be fearing the consequences of fighting this stance, the Israeli stance, for the question of Gaza. So probably he's found, Lula, the president of Brazil, has found something to fight for, and which can be very rewarding for him and for his interests in international affairs.
Would you say that it's also reflective of the leaders of the global South? We're seeing leaders in Africa, Asia, and the Americas certainly find their voice. They know that they're going to come up against a brick wall when it comes to the US's position on Israel and Palestine. And as you say, he's found his voice, but it seems that there is a groundswell of opinion that goes beyond politicians as well. It's the public too. Politicians are watching what's going on in their countries. Most of all, President Lula da Silva as well. He knows how Brazilians feel.
I could not agree more with you. And Lula possibly has that in mind when he uttered his words, very strong words, with regard to the war, to the conflict in Gaza. Of course, he was considering the support he might garner from the global South. After all, there are some 130 countries in the world that would recognize the Palestinian state as a full-fledged territorial state while condemning Israel for the military operations carried out in Gaza at the moment. So, of course, Lula has considered in his calculations this kind of landscape.
Interesting times. Mr. Belém Lopes, thank you so much for joining us for Minas Gerais. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
So here, you know, I thought this interview was very interesting because it lays out some of the political dynamics of what's going on in the global South and in South America specifically. But I would just say that that this was recorded about a month ago. So it's not exactly old news, but it isn't yesterday's news. And that also when the university professor says these were mostly left-wing governments, I think, you know, it's less a left-wing government and more governments that understand what colonialism is, governments that understand, you know, what it's like to be controlled by an occupying power, if you will.
Exactly.
And that's what I want to explore more in the upcoming weeks. Gustavo Petro has talked about a genocide in Colombia, and I want to talk about that. I'm going to talk about Venezuela, Nicaragua, and go more into depth about what this means. I also think it was interesting that the interviewer brought up BRICS and where things are going with BRICS and Brazil's role in BRICS. So there's a lot that was covered in a relatively short interview about the lay of the land politically in South America, and I want to explore that, and I think we're going to try to do Monday nights for this, and it might be 5 weeks or so in looking more broadly at the political dynamic, and then focusing in on individual countries and what their history has been with this.
Yeah, it sounds very exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, I'm glad. I am too. I just, I can taste it now. I've been talking about this for too long, but I can see it developing in front of my eyes. So, and I really appreciate your support for it, Dee. And I'm excited about it too. Very excited about it. I just happen to be the voice is muffled because that's what happens when I talk for an hour and a half.
Yes. And yeah, Steve Wolfbrand says here he was commenting at 9:36.
Mm.
Jordan is already full of refugees they can't handle anymore. And which is true, but the situation is they shouldn't have to. Palestine should be Palestine.
Hmm.
People shouldn't have to leave. People should have the option to return
They do by law.
by law, but somehow why does Israel control international law? It's ridiculous.
And it is because it has dire consequences, and we're seeing it.
Yeah.
So on that note, I think for tonight, I
We're gonna say goodnight. All right.
I'm gonna say goodnight. You can.
I was gonna say to please hit the like button, subscribe, and share everywhere. And think about Monday nights. Madeline is always she's gonna have a special show on, and that's gonna be wonderful with Latin America, and we're looking forward to that.
And if anybody's got suggestions, please, I'm more than open to any suggestions about what to look at, who to look at, where to travel, quote unquote, where to travel in Latin America on this topic.
Hmm. And
Oh,
also,
I'm sorry. And then I think the title is going to be, well, maybe of the show on Colombia anyway. Why did Hugo Chavez call Colombia the Israel of Latin America, and how is that different today?
Mhm. That's going to be interesting.
Yes.
And with supporting Palestine, I was going to say I get my coffee from the Palestinian Coffee Company. I buy the Jerusalem brand, and with every purchase, money goes to Palestine. And also, to please, Google or look up where you can buy different products from Palestine to help out the best you can, and do research, just how you can help out Palestine. And also, there's a lot of funds out there. People looking to get their families out of Rafah. GoFundMe's and Legacy Group, and just a lot. People really need help the best you can. And if you don't have a lot of money, you could share the information. Just keep sharing and sharing. It's so important for people really to see what's going on. And you may not be able to help a family, but somebody else may, just through your sharing. They were notified. And
And
I was going to say, Madeline, where do you get your coffee from?
Kafir masks. Kafir masks. But I think you should all buy Dia coffee. She's too humble to ask for it. But you can buy Dia coffee at D Piers, Buy Me a Coffee D Piers, or Cash App Dolores Piers.
Yep.
Because this has been going on since, a year ago November, right?
Yes, we have been talking about. Yeah, we talked about around the world. We were going to talk more about various places, and we were doing that. But it seemed that everything kept coming back to Palestine because Israel was constantly attacking Gaza or the West Bank and in Jerusalem. It was this constant terrorism coming from Israel onto Gaza, onto the West Bank, and onto Jerusalem. So this has been ongoing. And as much as we tried to talk about other places, we could not just not say anything.
No, and even in talking about Latin America, with the focus on the situation in Gaza, um, still pulled, into talking about other things. But this will be one night a week, so we can keep it continue to bring in breaking news also.
Yes.
And on that note,
Steve says good night.
I'm going to say goodnight and rest my voice and start doing some more research.
Yes. And like Madeline said, any suggestions, you could find Madeline or you could contact me or Greg or anybody and just oh yeah, good point here, Steve Wolfbrand. Boycott
Yes,
more salt. It's an Israeli product.
yes.
And a lot of
That's a
people
good,
didn't know that.
no.
That's a good point.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you for hanging in there with us tonight.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night, Madeline. Thank you again, Madeline, for your
You,
input.
you're so welcome. I'm glad to be back.
Yes, I'm glad you're back too.